The story of the Israelites in Egypt began with a promise. It began with family. The sons of Jacob, also called Israel, had come to this land. They were welcomed because of one of their own, Joseph. He had saved Egypt from a great hunger. He was a man of wisdom. He was a man of God. Because of him, his family found a home in the green land of Goshen. They lived in peace. They were shepherds. They were fathers. Their families grew. Their tents multiplied across the land. They were safe and they were blessed. So many years passed. The fields were good to them. The sky was kind. But time moved forward. The seasons changed, not just in the fields, but in the generations. The new king looked out upon the Israelites. He did not see the descendants of a friend. He saw a potential enemy within his borders. Fear began to poison his thoughts. He spoke to his officials. His words were filled with anxiety.
"Look," he said, "the Israelite people are now more numerous and stronger than we are."
His perspective was twisted by fear. He could not see the blessing they were. He could only imagine the danger they might become. He worried about what would happen if a war broke out. Would they join Egypt's enemies? Would they fight against the very people who had given them a home? Would they escape from the land? This fear grew into a dark and cruel plan. The king decided he must act.
"Come, we must deal shrewdly with them."
The word shrewdly was a mask for cruelty. His plan was to crush their spirit. He wanted to stop their growth. He wanted to control them. Fear in a leader often leads to oppression. The king's fear was the seed of great suffering. He turned guests into slaves. He would break them with labor. He would steal their freedom to calm his own anxious heart. The plan was put into action. He set taskmasters over the people of Israel. These were not gentle supervisors. They were cruel bosses. Their job was to afflict the Israelites with forced labor. The days of peace in Goshen were over. The people were rounded up and put to work. Their lives were no longer their own. They were now the property of Pharaoh. The goal was to make their lives bitter and hard so they would be weakened. The king believed hard work would stop their growth. He thought suffering could stop God's promise. The king's fear drove him to build. He forced the Israelites to build great storage cities for him. Pithom, Ramesses. Under the hot Egyptian sun, the people labored. They carried heavy stones. They mixed mud and straw. They molded endless rows of bricks. The daily life of the Israelites changed completely. Mourning no longer brought the promise of their own work, tending their own flocks. It brought the certainty of hard, forced labor. They were made to serve with rigor. This means their slavery was harsh and relentless. They worked in the fields, planting, harvesting. They toiled in the brickyards, feet deep in the mud, shoulders straining under heavy loads of straw. The sun beat down on them without mercy. The air was thick with dust, the smell of their sweat. Every muscle in their bodies cried out in pain. The Egyptians made their lives bitter. This was not just physical hardship. It was a deep, soul-crushing bitterness. They made them work with mortar and with brick. Imagine the monotony. Day after day, the same back-breaking task, mixing, molding, carrying, stacking. They were also forced into all kinds of service in the field. Every task was given with cruelty. The Egyptians showed no kindness. They showed no mercy. Hope began to feel very far away. They were trapped in a cycle of pain and exhaustion. Their freedom was a distant memory. The taskmasters were brutal. Their voices were harsh. Their hands were quick to strike. They cried out to God. Their groans rose up from the fields and the brick pits. Pharaoh's fear drove him to a new level of cruelty. His plan of forced labor was not working. The Israelites were still growing. So he devised a more direct, more sinister plan. He decided to attack the very source of their strength, their children. He summoned two of the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah, Puah. These women held a sacred trust. They welcomed new life into the world. They were present at the most vulnerable moments of family life. Pharaoh wanted to corrupt that sacred duty. He gave them a secret, horrifying command.
"When you are helping Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool," he said, "if you see that the baby is a boy, kill him." The order was chilling. He wanted them to become executioners. If it is a girl, he added, let her live.
But Shiphrah and Puah had a different allegiance. The Bible says they feared God. This fear was not the terror that drove Pharaoh. It was a deep, reverent awe of the Creator. They respected God more than the king. Their fear of God gave them courage. They looked at the king's command and made a choice. They chose life. They chose to obey a higher law than Egypt's. They refused to stain their hands with the blood of innocent children.
So the midwives disobeyed the king. When the king called them to account, "Why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live?" They had an answer ready.
They told the king, "Hebrew women are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive." It was a clever excuse. It saved them.
Because these two ordinary women feared God, the people continued to increase. God saw their courage and was good to them. He gave them families of their own.
Pharaoh was filled with rage. His secret plan had failed. He gave a new command to all his people. Every Hebrew boy that is born, you must throw into the Nile.
The river that was the source of Egypt's life was to become a graveyard for the children of Israel. Imagine the fear of an expectant mother. The joy of feeling a new life move within her was now mixed with a terrifying dread. Would her baby be a boy? Would she have to watch as her precious son was torn from her arms? Imagine the anguish of a father, powerless to protect his own child from the law of the land. Every cry of a newborn baby would have been a sound of both joy and terror. This was the darkest moment yet for the people of Israel. Their slavery was bitter. The whips of the taskmasters were cruel. But this was a new kind of suffering, an attack on their future. It was a command for genocide. The king of Egypt was trying to erase God's people from the earth. The sorrow in the land of Goshen must have been immense. The tears of mothers and fathers would have flowed as freely as the waters of the Nile. It seemed as if evil had won. It seemed as if the promise to Abraham was about to be drowned in that great river. Life for the Israelites became a landscape of pain, labor, and the specter of death. Yet a son's birth was a secret to be hidden, a life to be desperately protected. The heart of the nation was breaking. The people were pushed to their limits, bodies aching, spirits crushed. Days were long and filled with toil. Nights were short and filled with tears. They were caught in a vice, slavery on one side, murderous decree on the other. Yet they did not vanish. They endured. They held on. They kept their identity as a people. They did not assimilate into Egyptian culture. They whispered their fathers' stories. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. They reminded one another of the God who promised them long ago. This quiet persistence was defiance. They kept their traditions. They kept their names. They kept their faith, a flickering ember in a great storm. The story of Exodus 1 is a hard story. It is filled with the ugliness of fear, power, and cruelty. We see how a leader's anxiety can lead to oppression. We see the pain of slavery and the horror of a king who would command the murder of infants. The suffering of the Israelites is not glossed over. It is laid bare, a stark reminder of our world's brokenness. But it is also a story of incredible courage. In the face of overwhelming evil, we see the bravery of two women, Shiphrah and Puah. They were midwives, not queens or generals, yet their faithfulness mattered. Their tiny light kept hope from being extinguished. Most importantly, God is present even when He seems silent. The people grew. The midwives were blessed. The plan of the evil king was frustrated. God was quietly at work, weaving His purpose through suffering and courage. He had not forgotten His promise to Abraham.